From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in an old factory in Rochester, a former vanilla extract factory on the northwest side of town that possibly, used to produce more than just vanilla extract. As Patrick Hosken reports in City Magazine, the factory dates back to the 1800s, and it had a rather shady reputation then. But now it's the home to a company called For Bitter For Worse, whose mission is decidedly not shady at all. For Bitter For Worse joins the growing ranks of companies dedicated to creating adult beverages that do not contain alcohol. The owners got some help from the Grow New York investment competition, moved here from Portland, Oregon, and they believe that the shift away from alcohol consumption is not a fad. The numbers tell a rather surprising story. After a spike in alcohol consumption during the pandemic, Gallup's newest poll found that only 54% of American adults self-identify as drinkers. That is the lowest number Gallup has ever recorded. It doesn't mean that zero-proof or alcohol-free market is replacing alcohol. As Hosken points out, beer, wine, and spirits generate about $70 billion in tax revenue annually. The non-alcoholic market generates around $1 billion, but that number is definitely rising. And so what is fueling the change? Is it all about Gen Z? And what exactly is zebra striping? I've got a lot to talk about this hour, and I want to thank my colleague Patrick Hosken, arts reporter for City Magazine, for coming back in, talking about this. Thank you very much here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And welcome to Bob Hartman, who is next to Patrick, co-owner of AltBar, which is, first of all, welcome, Bob. Nice to see you. What is AltBar?
AltBar is a non-alcoholic bar. So we do retail sales, we do bar service like non-alcoholic cocktails and non-alcoholic wine and beer like you would at a traditional bar, but everything non-alcoholic. And then we do like special events, catering, stuff like that too. But, all around what you're talking about in terms of, serving the growing need for people who don't want to have alcohol at the center of the experience.
And where are you located?
We're on East Main Street in the North Winton Village. Well,
thank you for being here. And on the line with us is Shelley Elkovich, who is the founder and listed as the flavor maven of For Bitter For Worse. Hello, Shelley. Welcome.
Hi, Evan. Thanks for having me. Hi, guys.
Tell us what For Bitter For Worse is.
So we make bold cocktails with love, not alcohol. Some people might also call them mocktails. And we have 4 expressions, 2 sparkling aperitifs, and a red wine alternative, and a smoky, potent spirit alternative.
All right, so mocktails, very common term. Some people in the industry don't love that term. I know it's very common. Zero-proof cocktail, that's another term that you hear, or zero-proof alcohol, or zero-proof drinks. So you're going to hear a sort of a range there. Bob, what do you use most often?
We use both. So the distinction we make at AltBar is a mocktail doesn't have any non-alcoholic spirits in it. So it's juices, teas, syrups, nothing that emulate alcohol. And then we use non-alcoholic cocktails for the drinks that might use an NA gin or an NA whiskey, things like that. It's not official. It's the distinction we like to make because for some people, they prefer to stay away from the NA spirits entirely. And for other people, they like to have that kind of depth and complexity and maybe some of the reminiscent notes that an alcoholic cocktail would have.
The one thing we're missing here, Patrick Hosken, is Gen Z, because everyone wants to blame Gen Z. They're not drinking, they're not going out, they're not doing a lot of things here.
And as a millennial, I remember when we were getting blamed for everything too, about 12 years ago.
Now you get to be kind of the older guys. How does that feel?
Weird.
A little bit weird.
Yeah.
But it's not just a Gen Z thing, as your reporting finds here. I mean, certainly during the pandemic, there was a surge in alcohol sales. But that story is very different 5 years later, isn't it?
Definitely. And I also think like that's a huge component, but I also the Gen Z portion, but I also just think like I haven't done the appropriate research on this, but I think the data like also points to just the disappearing of like physical spaces. And I know that's a lot of what we'll sort of talk about, but I think a lot of it can be driven by, sort of one demographic's behavior, but it's not just like, oh, these people are doing something differently. It's a lot of it is there's not as many spaces anymore, I think, for people, and or like the behaviors maybe that previous generations were doing don't seem as appealing for any number of reasons. So, but it's a very complicated issue. I think it's like tempting from a marketing or a trend watch standpoint to be like Gen Z's, sort of driving down the trend, but I think it's bigger than that.
Yeah, and I think your story led me to, if I were going to try to characterize by generation, Gen Z would be the generation that is more likely to have total non-drinkers. Whereas older generations are, by number, starting to drink less. They're still drinking, but drinking less by choice. The interesting thing is, and Bob was pointing this out, I think this is a very important number to put out there, or at least kind of an idea to put out there. we do not need to bifurcate this into either you drink or you don't. What's the stat you were kind of telling me about before the program here?
Yeah, I mean, the stats vary depending on what source you're getting them from, but they all pretty much align that it's 80 or 90% plus of people who buy non-alcoholic drinks still drink. So it's not about abstinence, like you're saying. It's not about total sobriety. For some, for some people it is.
Sure.
But for many people, for the majority of people who are drinking non-alcoholic beverages, it's about moderating. It's about, training for a race. It's about being pregnant. It's about some health concerns. It's about just, testing it out. The whole sober curious, verbiage that's been thrown out there, just kind of experimenting.
And frankly, wanting to experiment because it is so much of a better scene than it used to be. I mean, the quality that you find at AltBar with what Shelley's doing, it's a whole different world. Not all that dissimilar to 15, 20 years ago. You'd go to a restaurant and they'd be like, well, there's a vegan option. Like we don't really care about it, but we want to have it. Now it's like, we really care about every dish here, and it's going to be great no matter what you get.
Yeah, it's a far cry from the joke. O'Doul's is kind of the butt of all the jokes now, right? But it's a far cry from having just an O'Doul's offered on the menu. And now, there's, I won't name brands and everything, but there's, kind of a more contemporary joke on that regard. But there's a lot of bars and restaurants that are putting real thought into this. And that's what we're trying to drive, at AltBar. I know Shelley's trying to do similar things too, is that don't be an afterthought. Don't just throw a Shirley Temple together and call it your mocktail. Put the same care and energy and effort into your non-alcoholic options as you are your alcoholic options. A, because there's a big market for it. You can drive your revenue, more than just selling a club soda and lime. And B, because it's inclusive. It helps welcome people in. It's all about hospitality, and the hospitality industry is about, creating these experiences and welcoming people in.
Shelley's time is shorter, so I got to get this story here. So you come to Rochester, but you're coming from Portland. So why here? Why now?
So yes, we launched the brand in Portland actually in 2020, 6 weeks before lockdown. And we love Portland. However, we were looking for personal reasons to relocate to the East Coast, specifically New York State. We wanted to be closer to our daughter who lives in Harlem. Everyone's quick to remind me that it's still a 5-hour drive away, but it's better than a 5-hour flight.
Yeah.
And we're interested we like smaller cities. Started looking around. As you know, we were winners of the Grow New York competition, an investment competition that is about innovation in agriculture and food and beverage. We were the first beverage company to ever win there. We also received some other investment from Launch New York. So, we found New York State has a lot of resources and a lot of support. And so we were able to, with this investment, look toward upstate New York. And we really could have been anywhere in the upstate region. And we focused on Rochester very quickly as an exciting city that's got, cool food and beverage happening, great workforce. There's so much manufacturing and food and beverage manufacturing here. And it's a really friendly city. So yeah, we moved here in midsummer, and we're just getting rolling. I did want to mention.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, Patrick, your generation is the hero of this category, because millennials are the ones that are driving the sales to date. So
Nice.
While it does cut across all demographics in terms of moderation, especially millennials are the big consumers of this category.
Well, we're aging now, right? I'm 35, so there we go. It's a little different.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But it's a different proposition than it was when I was 22. So I think a lot of people do feel that way.
No, I mean, like that's the whole Nate
Obviously.
That's the whole Nate Bargatze thing. In my 20s, people are like, you want to go out? Like, I'll go anywhere you want to go. Like, how late you want to stay up? And in my 40s, it's like, why would you even ask me? Now you're in the middle of that, Patrick. You're in the, okay, but how late do we need to stay out? Do I have to wear pants? Like, what are all the
That's
questions
right.
involved?
And that's why, in talking to Bob's the first one who told me about zebra striping, who gave it a name. It's like, this is a practice.
You better define this real quick.
That I knew about, but I had not known the name before. So the name is is basically alternating between alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. So yeah, the way that you would in zebra striping. So I guess that could encompass the practice of whether that non-alcoholic drink is a water, a seltzer, or whatever, or it could be something a little bit more exciting, I guess, something a little bit more intentional, craft-centric, anything like that.
Yeah, you don't have to take a break from having an adult beverage that has sophistication and depth just because you don't want to have 4 alcoholic drinks in a row.
So, Shelley, I know your time is short here, so why don't you just give us a sense for what you think the future looks like for you? It sounds like it's going well so far, but I mean, what kind of growth do you expect? Where are people going to find the products if you're successful? Companies like yours, I'm trying to get a sense of, do you want to be in stores? Do you want to be in bars? Are you going to have your own location? What do you want to do?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. So yeah, the category, as you know, is growing fast. It's projected to double again within 5 years. And when we think about our place in it, we think about a couple of things. We're building a company that has longevity, so we're looking at our mission. We're focused on our purpose for being, which is to co-create a healthier and more inclusive culture. Within that, yes, we produce drinks, and you were talking earlier about evolution in the beverage world, and yeah, O'Doul's, right? So if you look at coffee and you think about that, there's been like 3 waves, and we're now, first there was Folgers, then Starbucks, and then these more artisanal, coffee roasters and coffee companies. And that's where we're just entering now, is this 3rd wave of the adult non-alcoholic beverage that I'm really excited about. It started with O'Doul's, and then there were more industrial products that, arguably had better flavor, but were still, quite an industrial approach. And now what we're seeing is this craftsmanship and this attention to quality and craft, and in our case, also clean label. I mean, that's where we are really prepared to lead. We have the cleanest, most inclusive label in the category. So we start with certified organic botanicals. We don't use anything lab derived. And we know that clean label is the fastest growing area of interest with food and beverage consumers. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about the maturation and the growth of Gen Z, who are right now not huge consumers of the category, but they are really expansive, non-binary thinkers who care a lot about what is in the glass or what is on the label. And, they do their research about companies. These are folks who aren't going to be fooled by greenwashing, for example. So I see this as a lasting change in terms of socializing. It's already part of the mainstream. And then you add things like cannabis and psilocybin to the mix. So you could see why there are people who are maybe altering their experience, but they are still not consuming alcohol. And the other thing I'm excited about for us as a company is that we also contract manufacture. So we make our own drinks, and then we also produce for other beverage brands. And so that's sort of elevating the next wave of new innovators. And that can be anything from cold brew coffee to mocktails to functional drinks. We do all of that. So it's an exciting time.
So where do they find your stuff, Shelley?
Yeah, well, you can find us at AltBar for sure, on our website, forbitterforworse.com, Amazon, and then look for us at Whole Foods throughout New York State in January.
So before I let you go here, you talk about this 3rd wave concept, and I think that's a really good way of describing, because I think it gives people a good reference point. In that kind of vein, what's your best seller and what's in it?
Okay, so right now there are 2 that are kind of tied, honestly, but let's go with Eva's Spritz because it's historically been the best seller. It's made with rhubarb juice, hibiscus, bitter orange peel. It's herbaceous, it's a spritz, it's sparkling, so it gives you that bitterness with a little bit of citrus qualities. Nothing that we do is a mimic. We don't make alcohol analogs. So that's the other interesting thing about Bob's definition. We're not a mocktail in the sense that it's not juice and not robust without spirits. We make our own sort of bespoke spirit use as a base for our drinks, but we don't make anything that is like a gin and tonic or, an alternative whiskey, let's say, if that makes sense.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in, and, you guys are new to town here, so come back sometime.
Yeah.
Tell us how life in Rochester is sometime in studio, and we'll talk more at length on a different day.
I'm enjoying the first snow here today.
Yeah, sorry about that. A little early for that.
I got to start with a positive attitude.
Well, Shelley, thank you very much. Good luck to you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Shelley Elkovich is founder and the flavor maven of For Bitter for Worse. You can read about Shelley's business in Patrick Hosken's piece in City Magazine this month. It's called In Good Spirits. And Bob Hartman is with us, co-owner of AltBar in Rochester. Let me grab a phone call from Ian in Greece. Hey, Ian, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Bob, good to talk to you. We've done some events together. I'm a bartender in Rochester, and I've been sober about 9 years. And AltBar kind of popping up as, kind of like a pop-up with, kind of floating pop-ups over the last couple of years has been really amazing. And now that the brick and mortar is open, it's really offered a really amazing avenue for people who are, sober curious, or just trying to like find something new that they maybe haven't tried before. But just my perspective as somebody who's working in traditional bars in the craft scenes in particular, there's a bunch of trends that I'm sure Bob is aware of as well, that of just the kinds of people that are looking for non-alcoholic offerings these days has changed a lot. I mean, since I've really started bartending, it was like, something fun, fruity, and now it's really transitioned to like looking for complexity, looking for layers. The one thing that I have found that is maybe a little disheartening in a lot of places that are traditional bars that are starting to offer more non-alcoholic options is the kind of lack of awareness about sometimes present alcohol flavors or, in flavors that the bartenders maybe aren't always aware of, particularly bitter brands that are, by volume, sometimes up to 40%, 50% alcohol. And they're just dashing that into what they believe is a non-alcoholic offering without really checking with the guests. Like, hey, look, I may be using some flavors in here that have some kind of trace amount of alcohol. I just wanted to make sure that was okay with you. And that's something that I think really comes with awareness, and brands that are getting away from that, or at least boosting awareness, I think are really important to the movement, because me as somebody who is in bars, is around alcohol all the time, I don't mind if you do a dash of an Angostura bitters in my non-alcoholic drink, but that isn't always the case. And I think it's really important that bartenders around the city start to be more aware of the times that they are using alcohol, sometimes without even realizing it. Even in trace amounts, everybody has different sensitivities, health issues, whatever. And I think having non-alcoholic offerings that are strong in flavor so you can get away from those things is really, really important. That's why these brands and these stores are so, so important.
Ian, thank you for the phone call. What do you think, Bob?
Oh, I can't agree more. First of all, Ian's, like you said, we've worked together a little bit. He's taught me so much about bartending and about, non-alcoholic drinks, and that's one of the things that this community in Rochester is so awesome, that people who do drink, people who don't drink, everyone's coming together to try to do the same thing, which is this inclusion and this just positive guest experience. But to Ian's point, bitters are the biggest culprit. Fee Brothers here in town, they're non-alcoholic. They might have trace amounts in them. Most of them. I can't speak for all their bitters, but most of them are non-alcoholic, but have like trace amounts less than 0.5% kind of a thing. But even that, for some people, makes them uncomfortable. So if we're talking about like full sobriety, full abstinence, for some people, there's a big distinction between less than 0.5% and 0%. And so even when you were saying earlier about like 0 proof cocktails, if you're going to list something as a 0 proof cocktail, it better be 0%. Because that's what zero means. Zero means zero. Yeah. And for religious reasons, for sobriety reasons, for recovery reasons, for medical reasons, some people prefer to stay 0-0. And the less than 0.5 isn't good enough for them. And we respect that. At AltBar, we have everything labeled less than 0.5 or 0-0. We do dabble in both. But like Ian mentioned, there's also more solutions and products out there that are 0-0. Like we use another bitter company that's 0-0 entirely for our bitters, because we want to make sure that we're, able to do that for 0%.
Good stuff there. Ian, thank you for that phone call, and thanks for, I think, shedding light on an important part of this, because this conversation and Patrick's piece is, it's not just about one category of drinker. It is about zebra striping. It's about people who are making this choice that is permanent and fixed. It's about people who just want a nice mix, sort of in their social life. I would think, Bob, tell me if I'm wrong when I this is where my mind goes on the future of places like AltBar. I would think you're definitely going to have the people who are looking for an alternative for permanent reasons. They don't drink anymore. Maybe they're sober. Maybe they're celebrating their sobriety and they don't want to go back. But I don't think that you would succeed long term if you also couldn't attract people who do drink alcohol and do want just some good stuff, whether it's alcohol or not.
Absolutely.
I would think you got to be able to get both, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's part of our mission. Our mission is to not, to be an alternate for people in Rochester that don't want to have alcohol at the center of the experience. And it doesn't matter why. Like one of our taglines, our unofficial taglines is we're never going to ask you why you're not drinking. It might be because you're zebra striping. We've got people that come in and go to an alcoholic bar, then come to AltBar afterwards, and then go to another alcoholic bar just to extend their night. But it might be for people that are totally abstinent. And so like to your point, we need to make sure that we are being, if we're going to be truly inclusive, then we need to be including people who do drink as well as who don't drink. And one of my favorite moments every night is when somebody who does drink has a non-alcoholic drink and their eyes light up like, oh shoot, this isn't bad. Like this is really good. Like, and we've got multiple people who actually prefer some of our cocktails, our non-alcoholic cocktails, to the alcoholic counterparts because we're able to still do with these different ingredients, with what Shelley's doing, with what other people are doing in the industry. We're able to make carefully crafted, complicated cocktails.
Patrick, do you get a chance to sample a little bit for your reporting?
Well, yeah, actually, just after I went into AltBar about a week ago, and I would say moments after I walked in, I was sampling the most delicious sparkling rosé NA that I think I had ever tried. I mean, I think that was the only, to be fair, the only sparkling rosé NA that I'd ever tried, but it was delicious. It can only go down from there. It was great, yeah, and it was fun to like, I guess. To that point, it was fun to go into AltBar and like immediately get the warm welcome and just kind of be the recipient of the bartender who was your wife, who just began pouring immediately. I think there was something really nice about that and welcoming. And I think to your point of inclusivity, it definitely felt that way. And it was I mentioned this before, but like it was a terrible day. It was like really rainy and gross, and it was nice to like come in, shake off the umbrella, try a little like layered, complex, to Ian's point, flavor that was it was a nice moment to experience that.
What's in the sparkling rosé?
It's de-alcoholized rosé wine. So this was from Thompson & Scott. Naughty was the brand. They're out of the UK. They use German grapes, but they're going through a process of actually de-alcoholizing the wine. So it starts out as alcoholic wine, and then it gets de-alcoholized down to 0%. So this is my favorite sparkling rosé. So that's why I say you only got, you got spoiled if it's your first one, because unfortunately, there's a lot of not great NA wine out there too.
In that sense, do you agree with Shelley in her characterization that it is now like a third wave, that there was the O'Douls of the world, then there was kind of an industrialization, a ramping up of efforts, but products that were, sort of debatable in quality, and now you've got a craft scene that is next level. Do you think that's a fair description of it? I
do. I don't think it's 1-to-1 in the analogy, but I think it's pretty darn close. You look at if you look at the most popular brands that we sell, at least, most of them are craft, most of them are small batch, most of them are small mom and pop type companies. One of my favorite ones is out of San Diego, and it's like a small outfit, and they ship us direct. But it's almost like a reverse third wave in the sense that now the big money's starting to jump in. So if you look at like Constellation brands locally, they've got a Corona Zero, they're coming out with a Modelo Zero, if it's not already out yet. You look at some of the other, Budweiser or Heineken or whoever, it's more on the beer side, but even some of the gin brands or the spirit brands rather, like Tanqueray has a Zero now out in Europe. I don't think it's available domestically yet. So I think it's similar, but it's also almost reverse, where we were kind of more grassroots at first, and now the big money, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when the industrialization catches up, and if the craft side of things is still going to prevail, or if the bubble's going to burst a little bit. Because
that's my thought. So not to think that the lifestyle trend is a bubble at all, because I think the data bears that out. But that was my question. Hearing that, I'm wondering when you're talking about big companies getting involved and the money getting involved, then I start wondering, well, how long is that going to last before something changes and things start going in a direction where you're starting to lose a little bit of the craft, the bespoke, all that stuff. So
because what's important here is availability and access. What's important here is the ability to build community, to have a social experience, and not have alcohol be the center of the experience if you don't want it to be. And what we've been talking about so much is the product itself, the drink, the tangible thing in your hand. But it's a lubricant, pun intended, for socialization, for community, for relationships. And if you look through what any alcoholic bar, maybe not any, but most alcoholic bars or restaurants are trying to do is it's trying to build and foster that community. It's like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. And what we're talking about now is the growth, the lifestyle change. Is it doesn't have to be like an alt bar where it's totally, sober and, no alcohol on premise, but just options for people to engage in community and engage in those relationships, because that's what we're really selling, is we're selling the experience.
Let me grab a phone call from Frank in Greece next. Hey, Frank, go ahead.
Hello. I just wanted to say, Evan, I happen to be mutual friends with one of your friends, Evie Fanning, and I know you can't endorse a product or service, but I know Evie Fanning runs a cocktail bar on or about the South Wedge, possibly South Clinton area, and I want you to know I've never felt pressured or coerced to drink, and a good bartender and a good friend never demands that you drink when you don't want to drink. A glass of water, cup of coffee, ginger ale is always appropriate. And I just want to pass that on, and I'll give you a little hint. If you see the 999 grocery, someplace off South Clinton, you know you're getting close to Annie Fanning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. No, I mean, Evie's been on this program. Cheshire is a great place. Evie is brilliant and trains people really well. I've never been in an establishment that she has been a part of where let me put it this way. I would be surprised to ever see someone like Frank feel pressured by Evie or any of Evie's employees, or I hope most of the places in this city. I really, really hope that, because Frank, when you talk about, a glass of water or a cup of coffee or a ginger ale is always appropriate, of course. But part of what Shelley are doing is saying to you, you are not like sort of the outlier of the crowd that has to stand in the corner and drink ginger ale. You can be the center of the experience and the center of the menu with an intentional approach here that has no alcohol at all, and it's all about having a good time with something interesting. But I appreciate that, Frank. And Bob, do you have first-time customers who are nervous or maybe have had that pressure experience that Frank is talking about?
I don't know about pressure as much as it's the afterthought side of things that you were talking about. We talk about the ROI of joy, and part of the ROI of joy at AltBar is seeing people feel like they're, like you just said, they're the center of the experience. They're not an outlier. They're not on the fringes. They're not an afterthought. They're not, we got to do something because the person who doesn't want to drink is here. It's, we're here for you, and you're worthy of respect and joy and dignity, and we want to make sure that we're putting the same amount of effort into what we're serving you as what we're serving to anybody else. And to Frank's point, I actually learned a lot about what we do at AltBar at Cheshire, because it's about hospitality. Again, nobody's pressuring you there, but it's about like being included and being in a warm, welcoming environment, and not like the cocktails there were great from what I remember before I quit drinking, but that wasn't the point. The point wasn't having a reviver or whatever they were. The point was being there with friends or family or loved ones and just having a great time.
After we take our only break, we've got some really good listener questions. One is asking if a mock Manhattan or a mock mojito tastes like a Manhattan or a mojito. So that question, though, I think presumes some things. I mean, it's a fair one. We'll ask Bob when we come back here. But there's a big range when we talk about zero proof drinking, or we talk about mocktails, if you like that term, or just the NA scene. Yes, there's the O'Douls and the NA beers, but there's NA wines and beers that are a little more thoughtful than O'Douls. No offense, don't sue me. There are some really, as Shelley was describing, some really interesting drinks that are not meant to mimic a Manhattan or a mojito or anything. They're meant to be their own thing. And then, there's these products that are meant to say, hey, I love a Manhattan. I'm not drinking anymore. I'd love something that is close to a Manhattan. So it's a big, wide range. I find that really interesting. If you've ever been to the Finger Lakes during harvest time and they're pressing, and someone on the crew gives you just a little bit of free-run juice of Riesling, you're tasting grape juice you've never tasted before. I mean, it's so good. And you go like, what? I just want to drink this. well, now you probably can drink more of that, things like that. So Patrick Hosken wrote a really good piece called In Good Spirits for the new edition of City Magazine, and we're talking about the drinking scene. As we go to break, a little question for our listeners. If you want to email us, connections@wxxi.org. If you want to join the chat on YouTube, you want to give us a call at 844-295-TALK, 844-295-8255. I'm curious to know if you are drinking less or more than the pandemic time. Because a lot of people drank a little bit more during the pandemic. Maybe you had a cup of coffee in the morning, maybe one in the afternoon, maybe a cocktail at 5, or maybe that was just me. But I wonder if things have changed for you and why they've changed. If it's health, if it's for different reasons. I'd love to get your experience as we talk about the rise of the non-alcohol scene in Rochester.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. marycariola.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Jason writes to say, French Bloom Zero Alcohol French Sparkling will be carried by all New York State Wegmans stores. So for people who are like, how come we don't have wine in grocery store? Well, Wegmans is going to get on the alcohol. Don't worry, Bob. Wegmans and grocery stores will take over the market. Is this a good thing for you guys, or is this a challenge for you?
It's a complicated thing. So Wegmans is great, and I love their non-alcoholic selection is expanding because it is about everything we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's about including people. It's about making sure that you've got the right options for the right people. And as a non-alcoholic shop here in Rochester that does retail sales, they're a competitor. And so where we draw our distinction between us and Wegmans is you can come in and try almost anything before you buy it at AltBar, because not maybe the canned beverages, but like most of the spirits we have, non-alcoholic spirits we have open for our bar serves and everything. We want to like involve people in like trying things and trying new stuff and finding what they like, because there's a lot of variety out there. And, we can't compete with a Wegmans. So we kind of like, are like, if you've got a large box store liquor store versus like a kind of a boutique, liquor store that might have more, carefully curated stuff. That's kind of what we try to do. But overall, a rising tide is still lifting all boats in this industry.
Okay, fair enough. Jason, thank you for that. And to the question from a listener about, do you have non-alcoholic Manhattans and mojitos that taste like Manhattans and mojitos? I want Bob to answer this. Let me start with this. How often does somebody come into AltBar and just say, give me a Manhattan with no alcohol?
Almost every day.
Every day?
Maybe not a Manhattan in particular, but here's an alcoholic drink that I really like. Like, here's a margarita, here's a Manhattan, here's an old fashioned. I want to have that, but I don't want to have alcohol. And we, depending on the drink, not getting into all the details, we can get pretty darn close, if not almost to the point where, if you had one side by side, it would be hard to tell. And that's not because of us and our bartenders and their expertise, although that helps a heck of a lot, but it's because the industry is blowing up. We have we have non-alcoholic vermouths, we have non-alcoholic Amaros, we have non-alcoholic, whiskeys and gins and tequilas. And then like Shelley was mentioning, there's also a lot of stuff out there that doesn't emulate anything like alcoholic, but is just really cool and interesting in and of itself. And so we actually have a Manhattan on the menu right now that is a little bit of a riff on a Manhattan because it's using like a non-alcoholic Amaro-ish substitute, and then the instead of the vermouth, and so it's reminiscent of a Manhattan, but it's kind of doing its own thing. So yeah, the short answer is yes. We can do most of those pretty close, but the longer answer is the favorite drinks that people have at AltBar tend to be the more unique creations or the riffs on the traditionals.
Okay. Let's see here. Alex wants to know any plans at AltBar to eventually serve alcohol with the NA options you have.
We get asked that question a lot. The answer is no. We believe and we are supporting alcoholic establishments offering more NA options. And so we think there are dozens, if not soon, hopefully more than dozens of locations around Rochester where you can get alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks that are still carefully crafted. Our niche in the market, from a business perspective and from what we're trying to do from a mission perspective, is to be totally non-alcoholic.
And no change there. So I want to challenge a little bit of what you just said, though, Bob. You really want more restaurants and bars to offer NA? Because when they do, now I don't have to go to AltBar. It's like there's really good stuff out there. And there's more that are doing that. That's not a challenge to you?
It's not a challenge. In fact, we even offer like consulting services, and we actually not even just consulting, like business consulting, but like Shell restaurant that just opened. They buy their non-alcoholic spirits from us, and we give them a discount on it. So like we have partnerships with local bars and restaurants to help them, because at this point, you know, and again, from a business perspective, from a maturation cycle perspective of the industry, a rising tide really does lift all boats. If people understand that they can get a non-alcoholic drink that tastes just as good as an alcoholic drink, then it's going to help our clientele and our business. There may be, and hopefully there will be in the future, a time where it is more competitive and that we enter a hyper-competitive environment from a business perspective, but we're not there yet.
The one road bump for me with an NA cocktail is, my guess is, it's really crushable.
They can be.
You know, you may nurse a classic daiquiri for half an hour, and you're going to crush the AltBar menu. I mean, like, that's a compliment to what you're making. But I don't know, Patrick, did you feel like, whoa, I could really drink this pretty fast?
Here's what I thought when I brought home that rosé, which I did drink with my wife. It was that we drank the first glasses very quickly because it was delicious.
Yeah.
And because of that, but it's like we were just like ever more so in tune with the flavors because there was no alcohol in it. And so so we had a second glass, and we drank the second glass very slowly. We kind of nursed it because we were like, oh, well, it was so good the first time, but let's, like, I don't know, see what's going on from a complex layered perspective the second time. So that's totally anecdotal. But my experience was the first glass was heavily crushable. The second one was a little bit more to be savored.
No, I think that's a good description. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I would challenge and say that if you go to a good alcoholic cocktail bar, you're going to have a similar experience in a lot of those cocktails too, because if they're so well balanced and well crafted, they can be crushable, but there's something psychological in the back of your head that says, I got to drive home. And so that's kind of the similar experience we have at AltBar is, you know, we have a lot of bitter drinks. We have a lot of drinks that have spice and savory notes and things that, you know, you could drink fast, but you're going to choose not to because you want to really savor it and enjoy the experience. That being said, it's definitely, like, especially first timers, definitely drink their drinks a little bit quicker in general.
Okay.
But also, you've paid for the drink, so it's like, well, let's savor it a little bit. That's my view a little bit, like, you know. And I think that, yeah, whatever speed bumps get you to savor the flavors of the drink.
Once in a while at home, I'll make, I think it's listed, I mean, I probably make a messed up version. It's the sparkling almond, which is orgeat, lemon juice, and some kind of sparkling water. And I never make it the same way twice, but it's always delicious. But that lemon juice, that acidity slows you down a little bit. But my experience with those, I'm like, oh boy, got to make a big batch of sparkling almond because it's really, really tasty. But I mean, I think to Bob's point, people can get out of hand too when there's alcohol, and you know, it's the same kind of consideration. Rick in Irondequoit is on the phone next. Hey, Rick, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I was listening earlier when you had mentioned that some of the bitters has alcohol, and I never knew that personally. Being in the health industry, there are people that are put on a drug called anabuse, which they cannot drink alcohol because they have to stop. And if they happen to take in alcohol on that drug, it's not going to be pretty. I mean, it's like they need to vomit instantly. So I don't know if people ask or if that's something that's brought up to people that, you know, that's told to them that, yes, there is traces of alcohol in it, because I don't know if that's ever occurred, but I could certainly see how that could have potential to be a disaster.
Rick, I appreciate that. And NIH says antabuse, also known, it's also disulfiram, works by increasing the concentration of acetaldehyde, a toxic byproduct that occurs when alcohol is broken down in the body. Excess amounts cause unpleasant symptoms such as nausea and flushing of the skin. But in general, I think, Bob, that was the point you were making earlier. People do this for health reasons, and you got to know that 0 is 0.
Yeah, that's why I really appreciate Ian's call earlier, because bitters are the major culprit, right? Like, you know if you're picking up an alcoholic bottle of gin versus a non-alcoholic bottle of
The
gin.
culprit of I didn't know I was drinking alcohol and I got a little alcohol.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's the major culprit of where I see non-alcoholic menus go awry, is because, like Rick said, a lot of people just don't know. They don't know that these Angostura bitters are 80 proof, and 40% alcohol. So.
It's that high, Ango bitters.
Some of them can be, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've actually, so I won't go off on a tangent on that, but what I will say is bitters make the cocktail too, though. In so many of the cocktails, they're the seasoning. Like, you're not going to cook without salt and pepper and oregano or whatever your garlic powder, or whatever you're using. For good non-alcoholic cocktails and for good alcoholic cocktails, you should be using bitters in certain ones to help, elevate the flavors, add depth, add complexity. And so on the one hand, I love seeing bars and restaurants using bitters in non-alcoholic cocktails because it's showing that they're putting some actual thought into it. On the other hand, they got to disclaim it if it's going to be any kind of trace amount of alcohol, or there are non-alcoholic, 0% bitters out there as well.
How are the non-alcoholic bitters?
Phenomenal. Like,
oh, they are.
Yeah. So we use, I'm not trying to make a commercial here, but we use a company out of Chico, California. There were two French laundry sommeliers that quit drinking and they started a bitters company. And I would put them, I don't drink anymore. So but my wife still does occasionally. And she would put them side by side with any alcoholic bitters out there.
Oh, that's very impressive. And two sommeliers from the French laundry stopped drinking. What a story there.
That's a resume, right? Like that's a resume for what they're trying to build. And again, small batch, mom and pop shop, company of like 5 employees, and they're changing the world. They're changing our country in terms of what we can offer for drinks.
Patrick, you ever been to the French laundry?
I have never.
Me either. They wouldn't let us in, I think. They might, but you got to get a reservation well in advance.
I see.
I think it's still a thing. We're talking about the non-alcoholic drink scene, and I want to get back to your emails in just a moment. We're talking to Bob Hartman, who is co-owner of AltBar in Rochester, officially opened at the space you're in 2024?
That's correct. Summer
2024. Started as pop-ups post-pandemic. Is that right?
Yep. December of 21, we did our first pop-up.
And Patrick Hosken, arts reporter for City Magazine, with me in studio, helping guide the ship. His piece in this edition of City is called In Good Spirits. And Patrick wrote about Shelley Elkovich and the team of For Bitter, For Worse. Shelley joined us earlier this hour. That's a really fun story of a Portland couple that moves to Rochester. They want to be closer to family in New York City, and they end up winning they win a contest, they get a grant. Now they're up and running and doing really interesting things. The scene is really growing. How big, Bob, can the scene get realistically? When you talk about rising tide lifts all boats, until when?
That was my question as well. I'm very interested to know the answer.
Yeah, so my crystal ball's been broken for a long time. But
same.
I would guess we could easily double or triple, within 5 to 10 years, without any trouble. I don't know. I don't think it'll ever surpass alcoholic sales, but then again, when people were smoking, they probably never thought that there'd be more non-smokers than smokers. So I don't think from a consumer perspective, you'll see higher NA sales than alcoholic sales, but I do think I could see half a dozen spots here in Rochester being totally sober and all surviving and thriving.
And one of them, just to jump in, so the sort of impetus for doing this piece was the news in September that the music venue and restaurant Flower City Station is going to go in a direction, and frankly already has, they just haven't hard launched yet, but in a direction of having essentially no alcohol and becoming an all ages space. So shows now are all ages. I think it's 18 and up, no Guardian, but they've opened up their shows that way. They want to evolve into and this is a quote, Rochester's first non-alcoholic music cafe, functional beverage bar, full dining experience, hemp shop, and local merch and art hub. So it's very ambitious, I feel like. But that, I think, is a good example, and this is something we talked about when we had our conversation for the piece, Bob, is, I'm very curious to know what that will look like. I think that those are ambitious plans. The folks, I reached out to them to talk for the piece, and they, I think, are still kind of molding it. They're going to launch at the top of 2026, so I think they'll have a lot more to say then. But I'm very interested to know what that looks like. And I think the difference in that kind of a space versus AltBar. Just in particular, I know that AltBar does trivia nights, and you said I think you'd had a couple music performances, like acoustic kind of situations, and I know there's other performances there too. But this we're talking about like a full music venue. So I'm going to be interested to know the way that fills, sort of under the same umbrella as AltBar in terms of catering to a lot of similar people, but also fills maybe a different kind of a need, which is a live music space that does not have alcohol there.
Yeah. Have you been following that story, by the way, Bob?
I have, yeah. I haven't spoken with the folks that run it, but I'm excited for it. I think, again, like we're a craft cocktail bar, non-alcoholic craft cocktail bar, and kind of a carefully curated retail bottle shop. We can't be all things to all people. And so having a music venue that's all non-alcoholic, that's exciting for us. That's why I say like a half a dozen, maybe even more totally sober spaces in Rochester, because you've got dive bars, you've got cocktail bars, you've got wine bars, you've got all these alcoholic versions. Why can't, and if the movement keeps growing and the demand keeps growing, why can't you envision a future where there's NA versions of those?
I'm thinking about some of what Shelley Elkovich said, both in Patrick's piece and on this program earlier this hour, which is that she really doesn't think this is a fad. She thinks that there is more sustainable growth in the same way that Bob talked about. I mean, I don't think they would have moved from Portland here and given this a shot if they didn't think there was an opening in the marketplace. And that's where I do think the generational shift will matter more, because Gen Z won't be the youngest generation forever. Alpha's coming for them, and then there will be another and another. And it will be interesting to see what happens when Gen Zs are 40. And what they want to do with their social scene, because they clearly are drinking less. That is true. There's more people in Gen Z who are not drinking at all than any other generation that includes adults. And I think Shelley's point was a fair one when she said she doesn't think it's sort of just a pose. She thinks that this is a generation that has the kinds of values that are pretty clearly delineated. They want to know where a product comes from. They want to know what is behind a company. They want to know what the company's values are, and they will challenge on that. So how durable that is will be an interesting question. I'm not saying it's a fad at all. I'm saying it might be very durable, and that might become the permanent shift away. I think time will tell, but what do you see generationally? How do you think about the stratification there? Is your clientele pretty young?
It tends not to be, actually, for us.
That's interesting.
And so we're kind of a niche within a niche. So we're non-alcoholic, which is a niche in and of itself. But then we do craft cocktails, which tends to cater to more of your elder millennials, Gen X crowd. And so if you look at just our clientele, it skews to the older side of things. That's why I think there's room in Rochester for a bar, a non-alcoholic bar that caters directly to Gen Z. More like a neighborhood bar, more like, not craft cocktails with all, hand pressed juices like we do and handmade syrups or homemade syrups, but, something where you can just get like a non-alcoholic rum and Coke and have some louder music. And, I don't know, I'm 40. I don't know what the young people do these days, but, catered more to that type of a crowd.
Well, let me get another comment from a listener, a viewer on YouTube, who says, AltBar is a super great space for mixed crowds. I stopped drinking 4 years ago, and I go to AltBar with friends who do drink for sure. So mixed crowds as in some friends in the crowd who drink, some who do not. Again, you said that is common, right, Bob?
Very common, yeah. We, like I said, nationwide, 80-90% of people who are buying NA still drink. And we see a lot of them at AltBar in that comment exactly, where it's just people who are with somebody who doesn't drink. So maybe one person in the group is a non-drinker, and 3 or 4 of his or her friends or their friends are coming along to have engage in community and to have fun.
Jeff in Hilton says, Evan, I'm a runner, and I wear a Garmin fitness watch 24/7. If it can tell if I drink alcohol, and it shows the increased stress on my heart. One quarter of a glass of wine will show up on the watch, and I can monitor the progress of my body processing the alcohol. It takes about 90 minutes for it to clear my system. Seeing the added heart stress was enough proof for me to stop drinking alcohol entirely. That's Jeff in Hilton. So everybody's got different reasons.
Wow.
But that's a really interesting story, and I wonder how much more out there is like that. So Gen Z, maybe less about health, more about values, the kind of experience they want. Maybe people like Jeff, very serious about their health. So
don't you think economics plays a big part in that too? That's probably a separate hour.
Well,
but I've
in what
had
way?
that thought.
In what way?
In that if there is a generation that maybe by and large doesn't have the same kind of purchasing power because they don't have as much disposable income, that may also influence behaviors.
Well, yeah, for sure. And I just got an email from Marco wants to know what the average cost of an NA cocktail is, and if it is less than what you have to pay for an alcoholic cocktail.
Yeah, that's one we get often, and it's something that we talk to others.
Is that
in
an
the industry.
insulting question?
Oh, not insulting at all. No,
Okay.
I'm
All right.
smirking because it's such an important question, and I'm glad I have a chance to address it. You know, at AltBar, they cost the same as alcoholic cocktails, and it's not because it's a money grab. It's because the ingredients cost the same. So, you know, we're talking about like this non-alcoholic whiskey being made in small batches out of San Diego. You know, we're not using a well whiskey. We're not using like a bottom shelf whatever because it doesn't exist yet. And so as the non-alcoholic movement grows, maybe there will be kind of cheaper non-alcoholic spirits that we could use to lower the prices. But right now we're using top shelf stuff in everything we do. That being said, if a restaurant is charging you the same as a cocktail price for juices and water and sodas, then that's different. But but you know, as far as we're concerned, if it's a carefully crafted non-alcoholic cocktail that takes the same amount of work, same amount of R&D, same amount of effort and energy, and the same pour costs, you know, the same amount of money that goes into the ingredients, you have to charge the same.
And what's the average cost of a drink on your list right now?
It's between $12 and $14 for the ones that have non-alcoholic spirits in it.
Pretty standard for what you find in bars now. And I'm thinking of the economics question. I've got the comedian Scott Cease in my head, who might have a lot to say about like what can we can afford for a drink these days. But as we get ready to wrap here, AltBar, what is it? Is today Monday? Today is Monday. Woo. When are you open, Bob?
We're open Wednesday through Saturday. Wednesdays and Thursdays 3 to 9. Fridays and Saturdays noon to 10.
Don't go in tonight, then you'd probably get arrested because there's nobody in there and you probably have to break in. But if you go during business hours, your most popular drink right now is what, Bob?
Probably in my flannel era. It's Riff on a Mule. It uses a couple of different non-alcoholic spirits in it, and then some ginger beer and lime juice. That's a really popular one in the fall, and the other real popular one in the fall is called Changing Leaves. It's kind of like a whiskey amaretto sour.
Oh, yeah. I made an actual amaretto sour at home last week. I might have to try yours.
It's pretty darn good. It's one of the longest recipes we've had on the menu.
I want to thank you for taking the time, Bob, and I certainly wish you luck. And you know, not rooting for any individual business. I'd love to see this sector hang in there and grow. And it sounds like there's a lot of room for growth. So we'll be in touch. Good luck to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bob is the co-owner of AltBar in Rochester, and Patrick Hosken. This was a lot of fun.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great stuff. The piece is called In Good Spirits. It's in the current edition of City Magazine, covering food and bev for November. So pick up your city wherever you can find them. From all of us at Connections, thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for finding us on whatever platform that is the easiest for you. We want to be wherever you are, and we will be back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.